What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Chuds BBQ. My name is Bradley Robinson, and today I'm going to give you my top 5 tips for how to make the perfect Texas-style spare ribs. Coming up! These are some spare ribs. Pat them dry. Which is tip number 1. Here in Texas, we're all about the spare rib. They're the biggest, fattiest, and meatiest of all the ribs you're gonna find at your grocery store. Speaking of which, these are the 3 variations you are likely going to find. We've got your full spare rib, you got your St. Louis cut spare rib, which is the same exact cut, but just super trimmed up for you. And then you've got your loin back or your baby back ribs. And on the pig, the ribs sit like this. I've got opposite sides here, so really this should be like this, but this is a left rib, that's a right rib. But this is the rib cage of a pig, and when butchering it, they split it right down the middle, giving you spare ribs and your baby back ribs. And the real difference is 1, the size. Obviously, these are a lot shorter. And 2, the type of meat you're dealing with. These come from the backside of the pork loin, and these come from the backside of the pork belly. So when looking for ribs, you really need to decide, do you want loin meat or do you want belly meat? Do you want big ribs? Do you want little ribs? They're both delicious, but I prefer the spare rib because pork belly is a lot more tasty than pork loin. A lot fattier, a lot juicier, gonna do a lot better on the barbecue pit. Super tasty stuff. But that being said, we do need to trim these up because they are looking a little bit big. We got these flaps hanging off. There's a chine bone right here. So first thing we're gonna do is remove this chine bone. If you look at the end here, you can kind of see where this bone ends. You can just get right in there and just do a nice straight cut with a rather heavy knife to make the job easier. And there we go. This big bone is now removed. Next up, we got to take the skirt meat off the back. This one's pretty small. Sometimes it's really big and flops over. We want to take that off so it cooks nice and evenly. Just like a brisket, anything thin and hanging off like this is just going to burn up and not be too tasty. Going through, clean this up a little bit, nothing to it. And then this end is really thin. We got some tiny little bones in here. So I usually like to find the first little baby bone and then cut right on the other side of that. Square it off. And this is starting to look like a pretty good rack of ribs, except this top part is really thin and kind of like a brisket. That lean end will overcook, peel up, get really hard and crunchy. We don't want that, so we're gonna just give this thing some good shape, kind of following this cut and terminating it right at the top of the bones over here. Take all that off, and there we have a beautiful looking rack of spare ribs. And again, to compare that to our St. Louis cut over here, St. Louis cut is in the front. We get a whole extra inch or so of beautiful meat on there. And not to mention, these St. Louis were selling for about $4 a pound, where these spare ribs were selling for $2. So with about 4 seconds of butchery, we're getting more meat at half the cost. Highly recommend it. And you can use all this trim for making sausage, making pork burgers, whatever you want to do. So now that we've got our spare ribs trimmed up, it's time to move on to tip number 2, which is all about the rub. Now, ribs are great because they're incredibly versatile when it comes to flavor profiles. You can go sweet, spicy, savory, sticky ribs. You can really get away with a lot. But here in Texas, we keep it traditional with just salt and pepper, and I think it's a really great way to cook a rack of ribs. A lot of people will use rubs that are full of paprika and other powdery spices that have a really nice color to them, but adding paprika for color, in my experience, just doesn't really make as much sense because a lot of powdery spices and a mustard binder on here will create a bit of a barrier that the smoke can't penetrate. But by using just salt and pepper and no binder, I found you can get a really nice natural red color from the smoke on these ribs, plus a little extra smoky flavor. So oddly enough, by adding paprika to add color, you're adding paprika color, but you're preventing smoke color. And that's what we're after today. So I'm gonna hit this with a nice coating of some kosher salt and some 16 mesh black pepper, on sale now at shopchuds.com. And as always, I'm gonna start on the bone side. That way we can preserve our presentation side, so when we flip this thing over to do the other side, it's not gonna smear the rub or anything like that, but just a nice even coating, not too heavy, because this is a rather thin piece of meat. And I like to do my salt and pepper separately just so I can make sure I get enough salt and a nice even application of pepper for a nice presentation. Looking good. Fighting the wind. And again, I don't like to use a binder. I really don't think it's necessary, especially because this is gonna sit out for about 10-15 minutes while we wait for the pit to fire up anyway, which will give the salt some time to repel some moisture out of the meat, which will then help all the pepper stick. And don't forget the sides, folks, come on. And that is looking perfect to me. Let's fire up the pit. Boot snake. This video is brought to you by HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh delivers fresh quality produce from the farm to your door in less than a week, so you can savor all the flavors of summer right from home. You can choose from over 55 weekly options featuring seasonal, pre-proportioned ingredients picked at peak ripeness, so you can be sure that everything you get is going to be absolutely delicious. My favorite part about HelloFresh is that it saves so much time, money, and stress because someone else has already done all the shopping for you and delivered it right to your door in the exact proportions you need for a specific meal, which means you don't have to go to the grocery store, and it's going to drastically cut down on your meal prep time. And because they only give you what you need for the specific meal, HelloFresh is incredibly sustainable. It's the first carbon neutral meal kit company, and nearly all of its packaging is recyclable. And it also helps a lot with food waste, because instead of having to buy an entire package of a specific ingredient, they only give you what you need. So if you're looking to save some time in the kitchen, enjoy some quick and easy food, or just trying to learn the basics of home cooking, go to HelloFresh.com and use code ChudsBBQ16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 surprise gifts. Again, link in the description. That's HelloFresh.com. Use code ChudsBBQ16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes and 3 surprise gifts. Thank you, HelloFresh. Tip number 3 is all about the cooking schedule. There's many ways to go about doing this, but this is the way I've been doing it lately, and it's been working out great. On the pit we go, meat side up, thick end towards the fire, and we're gonna rock this pit right around 250 degrees for the first few hours to make sure we get some really nice smoke on there, some really nice color on there. Set the bark on top, and then we'll check back in a little bit. 2 hours later, let's see how these ribs are looking. Oh yeah, got some beautiful color on there already. So now I'm gonna flip them over. That way we can get some color on this underside and we can crisp up this membrane that we've got on here. A lot of people like to remove it, but I like to leave it on. It kind of holds in all the fat to the meat, giving us a more tender, fatty rib at the end of the day. And if you flip it over and toast this underside a little bit, it'll cook up and be nice and pleasant to eat. So another hour or so on this side, and then we'll check back in. 2 hours later, let's see how these ribbies are looking. Oh yeah, looking real nice. Beautiful color on there. Now I'm gonna flip these back over so we can start spritzing this top side. Now spritzing ribs is something I really like to do. It's a great way to add another layer of flavor to your ribs. And generally, I like to go with a sweet glaze. All you gotta do is pick a liquid of some sort and pick a sweetener of some sort and mix them together. Usually I go with water or apple cider vinegar. Apple juice would work really well. Pork stock, anything you want. And for sweeteners, I've done honey, I've done simple syrup, I've done brown sugar simple syrups, I've done agave nectar before, but my classic go-to is some maple syrup. So into this here squirty squirt bottle, I'm gonna go in with some apple cider vinegar and some beautiful maple syrup from New Hampshire. Boop. Just enough to add some sweetness, but we wanna make sure it stays nice and thin so it's still viscous enough to come out of the old squirt bottle here. But this is a great place to get creative. You know, you can throw some Worcestershire sauce in there, some hot sauce, whatever you want. We're keeping it pretty basic today though. So we're about 4.5, 5 hours into this cook, and I'm gonna start spritzing these guys every 15, 20, 30 minutes or so until they are done. That way the vinegar can evaporate, leaving just the syrup and some extra flavor behind, giving us a lovely sweet glaze. So I'll see y'all when it's time to wrap. After several spritzes, let's see how these ribs are looking, shall we? Looking good, nice and red, beautiful bark on there, smelling fantastic. Don't think I mentioned it, but tip number 4 was the spritz, and tip number 5 is the wrap. Nice rack. So before I wrap these up, I'm gonna hit it with one last spritz, as well as some barbecue sauce. Ooh, don't mind if I do. And we're just gonna rub that in all nice. Looking good. Flip them over. We'll do a little sauce on this meat side over here as well. One more spritz for good measure. And wrap them up tight. Now when wrapping ribs, I always like to go bone side up, meat side down, and that's for a few different reasons. One, if we went bone side down, those bones would very likely puncture the foil and all of our juices would leak out. But by having them bone side up, all the juices will collect in the bottom and surround the meat, tenderizing it, making sure everything is nice and flavorful, nice and soft, and nice and tender. So, that being said, back on the pit these go. They're around 180 internal right now, and we're gonna cook them for another probably 30, 45 minutes until they come up to temp around 200 degrees, feeling nice and flexible and probing, nice and tender. And just like that, these are done. 6.5, almost 7 hours in, which is weird. Usually rib cooks are only 5 or 6 hours for me, but the cook I did last week also took a lot longer. I think it's because it's so hot outside, which is kind of counterintuitive. But I had to throw a lot less logs on this fire to get this pit up to 275. So I think I was cooking with a lot more radiant heat than convective heat, and hot moving air cooks a lot quicker than heat just radiating from the steel. So that might have something to do with it. I don't know. Either way, we're gonna let these rest for about 15, 30 minutes or so until they come down to eating temperature, and then we're gonna slice on in. Ooh. Ooh, look at those beauties, folks. Nicely rested, ready to slice in. Just look at that wobble. That is a beautiful looking rack of ribs. So to recap, my top 5 tips for how to cook the perfect Texas style rib is 1, start with some spare ribs with a beautiful trim on them. 2, keep it simple with just salt and pepper. 3, start the cook low and slow around 250. Flip them over 2 hours in. Then you can start ramping that temperature up to around 275. Tip number 4, get yourself a sugary spritz to get a wonderful glaze and add some nice sweetness to your ribs. Tip number 5 is wrap them up with some barbecue sauce, let them finish cooking, and what you're left with is some beautiful, saucy, tender, smoky ribs. Let's slice in. Hey! And there you have it, folks. Some beautiful, smoky, saucy, sweet, savory, perfect looking Central Texas style barbecue spare ribs. I think it's time to dive in. Let's go for a nice middle of the rib, nice meaty guy, shall we? Look at that beautiful color on there. Oh, nice and tender. Nice smoke ring on there. Hard to complain with that, folks. I can't wait any longer. Beautiful bite mark on there. Clean off the bone. Ow, that is so, so good. Can't beat it. Can't beat it. I mean, what's not to love about a Texas style spare rib, right? Sweet, smoky, tender. Nice and bite through, but clean off the bone. Beautiful amount of sweetness. The saltiness is right there. Peppery. That is a damn fine rib, if I do say so myself. That's what life is all about, folks. I haven't had ribs in a minute. These are hitting the spot. I'll tell you what. And like I was saying earlier, there's a million different ways to do ribs. This is just one of my favorites, but you can do whatever you want. You can make them sticky, you can make them saucy, add some Asian flavors, some Mexican flavors. And I'd be lying to you if I said that this is how I cook ribs every time, you know? Half the time I'm feeling lazy. If I'm just cooking for myself, I'm gonna grab some St. Louis cut ribs, throw some Chud rub on there, toss them on the pit, don't flip them at all. Might not even spritz them, and they still come out great. You know, ribs are very forgiving and a great way to experiment in the backyard, because these are just fantastic. Beautiful. But again, there's something to be said about the simplistic rib, you know, salt, pepper, barbecue sauce, some nice smoke on there. But without further ado, I think it's time for the official taste test. Give myself a boneless chunk. Who's a good girl? All right, y'all, and that is it. That is my top 5 tips for how to make the perfect Central Texas style spare ribs. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, let me know by slapping that subscribe button right in the pecker. Let YouTube know by dropping a like on this video. If you give this recipe a try for yourself, be sure to tag me on Instagram at Chuds BBQ. I love to see what y'all are cooking. Big shout out to all the Patreon members. Thank you for supporting Team Chud and allowing me to keep making all these videos. And until the next time I see you, please go cook something outside. Peace.